When we hear things on the news, for example, that Senator John Fetterman checked himself into Walter Reed Medical Center for treatment for clinical depression, we think, wow, that is brave. That's hard to do. It's hard to ask for help. It requires vulnerability. At the Worship Associate Retreat, when we had a conversation about vulnerability, someone said, vulnerability is the first thing we look for in others and the last thing we reveal in ourselves. The statement seemed to strike a chord as heads nodded around the room. We admire others when they show vulnerability, yet are hesitant to show it ourselves. Why is that? When someone admits their vulnerability, we consider it a strength in them. Yet when we feel vulnerable, we consider it a weakness. We have to flip this on its head if we're going to strengthen our ties in this deeply interdependent and fragile world in which we live. We need to confront this barrier of self-judgment. I've been thinking about times when I've needed help and chosen not to ask for it. There must be a reason. There must be something I get out of not asking for help. Here are some things I get out of not asking for help when I need it. I don't have to feel vulnerable in front of another person. I don't have to spend time and effort explaining what I need. I don't risk being rejected and not getting what I need. I don't have to listen to how someone else would solve my problem as they instantly become an expert on my life. Yes, there's some snark right under the surface there. I avoid the risk of having things turn out even worse. I don't incur debt, the expectation of reciprocity. My privacy is maintained, and I can take pride in my fiercely independent nature. I don't have to change my self-image. But what might I receive if I did ask for help? I might receive help. I might feel relieved of my burden. I might make a new connection to a person. I might learn another perspective on my problem. My courage might be affirmed, and my dignity respected. I might make someone feel good that they can help me. I might look forward to having a chance to return the favor. I might experience interdependence. So what if we muster up our courage and the first person we ask for help says no? Do we stop? Do we give up? In the book Healing Conversations by Nance Gilmartin, we learn about the rule of 6. She writes, the rule of 6 works like this. You have to ask 6 people for help. Oh my God, 6. Because the first person you ask might be busy. The second might not want to get involved. The third might not be able to take care of your whole request. The fourth may refer you to someone else. The fifth can't do what you ask, but can help in other ways. The sixth might be the one who, when you are good and ready to give up, simply says, sure, no problem. Anything else I can do? Gilmartin continues, friends who patiently taught me how to ask for and receive help have hammered one key point into my head. Asking for help is merely a sign of being human. You actually show that you need others. When we don't ask for help, we think we are sparing people the trouble of doing something for us, But in fact, if we would just ask them or accept their unsolicited offers, we would be giving them a gift of letting them have the pleasure of making a difference. One of the reasons people join a religious community like ours is to have a ready-made pool of people to give and receive help as life's challenges come our way. People are usually most comfortable asking for help from others they know in a community, which emphasizes the importance of getting involved in one of our many small groups so you can get to know folks. But if we are to live up to our core values as a community, we must also trust that we can ask for help from people we don't know. That doesn't happen automatically. We have to practice taking the risk and making it happen. Some of you are familiar with our pastoral care ministry, but it kind of flies under the radar. So I'll lift up a couple of aspects. Our pastoral care associates, as Busy mentioned earlier, are church members who are trained listeners, available for a one-on-one listening presence. Our pastoral care associates, I think we have 8 of them, are underutilized at the moment. They're eager to offer their listening ears. You don't have to be suffering from a life-threatening disease or grieving the death of a loved one. You don't have to. You might just be trying to make a big decision or sort through challenges in a relationship or figure out what your spiritual anchor is during a challenging time. You might be simply under a lot of stress or lonely, and you can ask for a PCA. We also have a drop-in monthly online grief support group for people grieving any type of loss. Everyone's welcome. We have a shawl ministry if you would like the comfort of a shawl or lap robe made by another member of the community. Just ask for one. You can have it. There's no mystery to it. We also have pastoral care providers who help with short-term practical needs like meals and rides. The balance between the need in our community and people available to help fluctuates, which can be disappointing. If you need help, ask for help, and no one's there to bring you a meal. But at this moment, we have a small team of people who are ready and willing to help. You can also join that team by signing up at the member services table today. If you'd like help from a PCA or a PCP, or if you can't remember those acronyms, just someone to listen, someone to bring you some practical help, just ask one of the coordinators that are listed on our website, in our e-announcements, and in the pastoral care brochure that is around the church. Because we are human and humans are imperfect, sometimes our care system at First Church doesn't work as swiftly or as effectively as we would hope. We all make mistakes, we fall short. Sometimes people have to ask for help more than once to get attention in this mostly volunteer-driven ministry. Just remember the rule of 6. Writer and dream worker Toko Pa wrote, "We've made a hedging around the very places we should be depending on one another. We've privatized our pain. And then it's hard to reach out. It's hard to be seen with your messy lostness, exhaustion, and overwhelm as you stumble through the complexities of life. But how else can someone become trustworthy unless you allow them to share in your hardship? How can we form the village we ache for unless we allow ourselves to wrestle with these things together?" As Busy told us, it's all a matter of admitting that we don't have to go it alone. My encouragement for us to give and receive help more often in this community is because we affect each other. We can increase or decrease each other's health. Science backs it up. In his book, Social Intelligence, Daniel Goleman wrote, in a study of elderly people hospitalized for congestive heart failure, those who had no one to rely on for emotional support were 3 times more likely to have another episode requiring a return to the hospital than those who had warm relationships. Love seemingly can make a medical difference. Among men, getting angiography as part of treatment for coronary heart disease, those whose loved ones were reportedly least supported had about 40% more blockage than those who reported having the warmest connections. Conversely, data from a number of large epidemiological studies suggest that toxic relationships are as major a risk factor for disease as are smoking, high blood pressure, or cholesterol. An interdisciplinary research group at Ohio State University, led by psychologist Janice Kikolt-Glaser and her husband, immunologist Ronald Glaser, has shown that the effects of continual stress reach all the way down to the level of gene expression in the immune cells, essential for fighting infections and healing wounds. The Ohio State group studied 10 women in their 60s, all of whom were caring for a spouse with Alzheimer's. The caregivers were under relentless strain, on duty 24 hours a day, and feeling terribly isolated and uncared for themselves. A gene that regulates a critical range of immune mechanisms they found was expressed 50% less in the caregivers than in other women their age. The continual stress of constant caregiving in social isolation impairs the brain's control of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, or HPA axis, which in turn weakens the ability of the immune system genes to do their job fighting disease. My takeaway, it's in the social isolation that increase the caregiver's stress and weaken their immune systems. That's the key takeaway for me, that social isolation. Not everyone has healthy relationships in their family or a well-developed circle of friends. So there must be other ways to evoke help during challenging times. Mutual aid groups have been filling the gap. In an essay called Welcome to the New American Dream, Alyssa Court lists examples of mutual aid groups that rose up during the pandemic. Local strangers, she says, connected on the internet to bring groceries, bring eyeglasses, and medication to one another. They placed refrigerators in urban areas with free food inside. In 2021, there are an estimated 800 such groups nationwide, but informally, people who study volunteerism say there were many more. Near my apartment in Brooklyn, Court wrote, a volunteer group was organized by community activist Crystal Hudson to help the elderly and financially stressed in the neighborhood. The result of that group was that creatives in their 20s were buying chicken feet and pig feet and taking them to the doorsteps of elderly Caribbean Americans. It meant that Hudson herself heard people cry on the phone when she asked them what they wanted us to buy. She said, they told me, no one has ever asked me what I wanted to eat before. Court claims mutual aid groups can rethink charity and create spaces where the giver and the receiver are more aligned. Why do we sometimes ask for help by pretending we are asking for a friend? when we're really asking for ourselves? I think we do that because risking vulnerability is scary. Human beings exist in a culture, in a society, where power structures cause some people to be more vulnerable than others. Black, Indigenous, people of color are vulnerable in a racist society in a way that white people are not. Women are vulnerable in a sexist society in a way that men are not. People with disabilities are vulnerable in an ableist society in a way that people without disabilities are not. LGBTQ+ people are vulnerable in a homophobic and transphobic society in a way that cisgender and straight people are not. People living in poverty are vulnerable in a way that people with financial resources are not. It's just the way it is in the society we live in. So when we encourage each other to show our vulnerability, we need to keep in mind what we're truly asking of each other. Because we live in the society we do, we have different experiences of vulnerability. And the walls are not necessarily going to come down for good reasons. Tarana Burke, co-founder of the Me Too movement, speaking of Black people, said, "We are vulnerable even when we have not chosen to be. The existence of Black women is always under assault. Our hair is an insult. Our bodies are violated. Our Black brothers, sons, fathers, daughters, mothers, sisters, grandmothers, aunties are all vulnerable. We can disappear, be assaulted, be murdered under the color of law without recourse. Despite our credentials and accolades, we can be the first to be laid off. We know this and are reminded of this. We are always vulnerable, living without certainty and at risk." In a collection of essays edited by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown called "You Are Your Best Thing: Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience," Duran Young, founder of Black Therapist Rock, wrote, "It's very difficult to ask people to set down their armor and be vulnerable when racism and white supremacy demand armor." In the same book, Laverne Cox, 4-time Emmy-nominated actress, wrote, "I don't know how to leave my front door and not armor up. I'm becoming aware of just how automatic it is for me. And it makes me really sad because I would love to let it go." She continues, "I had surgery earlier this year, and about 2 weeks afterward, I had to go to the pharmacy and pick up a prescription. This is in Hollywood. It was my first time leaving the house after surgery, and I couldn't walk fast. I felt vulnerable. It was scary because my way is to walk fast and to always look around me, hyper aware of my environment. Because I've been kicked on the street. I've been harassed. All kinds of crap has gone down. And that day, I was coming back from the pharmacy, wearing my mask and a visor, and this woman says, 'Hey, sister, how you doing?' Oh, excuse me, I mean brother," and totally misgenders me. Still today, this happened this year. I often associate the misgendering with danger because I don't know what's about to happen. And I was thinking, I can't run. I can't run right now. I was so terribly scared. I'm 48. I'm famous Laverne Cox. And I'm still scared to leave the house. I'm scared of walking down the street because it's still not safe to be a Black trans woman just walking down the street. So the armor is real. And the danger is real anywhere. Here in Milwaukee, 3 Black trans women were murdered within the last 9 months. Legislation in Florida requires universities to send their students' medical records to the state. Legislation in Tennessee outlaws drag shows. Other states threaten to ban gender-affirming healthcare. In Unitarian Universalism, we affirm everyone's right to bodily autonomy. This mutual respect extends to the delicate and dangerous dance of showing and sharing our vulnerability. Everyone's vulnerability and need for armor is different, because everyone's life story and experience is different. Everyone's experience of society's structural oppression is different. We must respect that, even as we lean into creating spaces and relationships of trust. Spaces and relationships in which we can ask for help, not just for a friend, but for ourselves. How can we normalize asking for help in our community? We can agree that it's okay to say yes or no when someone asks us for help. Agree that it may take 6 times before you find what you need. Agree that it's okay to set boundaries on how much you give or receive. Agree that being human in community invites us to be vulnerable at times, and we get to decide for ourselves when we are ready for that. Because for many reasons, we are not always ready. And yet, we live in the midst of a continually renewing, human-made interdependence, just waiting to be tapped. May we do our part to be and become fiercely interdependent. May it be so.